Yeah. Awesome. Well, let's get into it. So why don't you start off by giving your name, the pronouns you use, and then
Hmm.
your like social location, like the identities that are important to you.
Hmm.
Um, and if you care to do so, share your astrological information.
Oh, okay. Wasn't expecting that last one. Let's start there. Well, I'm a Taurus. I don't know like my moon or any of that stuff.
That's fine.
I wish I did. I've been actually trying to learn that stuff, but it's super complicated
Hmm.
for a novice. Um, my name is Jermar Perry. My pronouns are he, him, his. And the other question I did not answer yet is my cat and dog fight right beneath me, of course, on time.
Totally fine. I'm sure my cat will pop in at some point. He's done every single interview I've done so far.
Right, it's only right.
Hmm.
And of course, they have to be right next to me. But to
Hmm.
answer your last question, oh, was about the group. Was the group that I focused on? Was that the question?
Oh,
I didn't phrase it
the other
correctly.
question I asked was your social location, so like the
Ah, okay.
identities that you hold,
Right,
and
right, right.
yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So I'm a black man.
Hmm.
That's probably the two identities I hold. I'm a Philadelphian,
Hmm.
transplant to the St. Louis region. Guess that's
Hmm.
kind of like an identity that I hold.
Hmm.
Um, and the work that I do is mostly surrounded by black self-identified men.
Awesome. Yeah, and I do believe that you are the first cisgender heterosexual person that I have interviewed. So,
Wow, I am amazed and honored. Hopefully, I don't mess it up
and
for the rest of my.
um, and I'm thrilled to have you.
Oh,
Absolutely.
thank you, thank you. I appreciate
Yeah.
that. That's not something I take lightly. I greatly appreciate that you felt like I was worthy of that because I know that's not always an easy group to exist with.
Well, and I one of the things that I do want to talk about is
Hmm.
the circumstances that we met,
Hmm.
and
Right. Yep.
um if you want, let's talk about that first. Can you
Hmm.
just, for the class, talk about how we met?
Yeah. So Andy and I met. I'm bad with years. The '90s and early 2000s are rough on the brain.
I think it
Um,
was 2000. It
two,
was
three,
2018.
wow, that long ago? So that's what, 1920? That was 4 years ago?
Yeah.
Jesus.
Yeah.
Yeah, so 4 years ago now, which I was not going to guess. 4 years ago, Andy and I were the first group who did what was known as the Men's Story Project, um, which exactly is self-explanatory. A group of self-identified men got together and shared stories about masculinity. Um, So yeah, I can't remember the number it was of us. I want to say eight, maybe the first year, somewhere along those lines. Maybe I'm missing the mark by a few.
That sounds about right. I think
Hmm.
so.
Yeah, so it was a lot of us on a stage. We met for a few months, maybe 2, 3 months to rehearse, get to know each other, build a bond, um,
Hmm.
all those things, critique stories, share stories, whittle down stories, all of that great stuff. Um, And yeah, I think that sums it up, right? Did I miss any key points?
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. Definitely. That's the basics of it.
Hmm.
And I was just a year into my transition at the time. So that was like
Hmm.
one of the first like men's spaces that I had
Right.
occupied.
Hmm.
Um, and without like getting into a lot of detail and like talking about anything negative, there was something that happened in the course of those workshops
Hmm.
where I remember like at one point I had expressed that I had been hurt by something someone
Hmm.
else had shared.
Hmm.
And the next week you came back and you had done a lot of thinking about that.
Hmm.
Um, can you speak to your thought process in that moment and the impact that that had?
Um, I would say overall, to generally speak, and not just to focus on that one topic, I would say
Oh yeah, of course.
generally the experience when it came to those things, a lot of things came up. I did it the second year, and the vibe was a lot different, even with that group. Um, but I will say, generally, for me, a lot of things that came up was just kind of just learning, just like being
Hmm.
quiet and learning from people. Um, it's not about if I think it's not about me thinking I offended you. Or it wasn't me. Let's say,
Right.
metaphorically.
Yeah.
If I offend someone, then it's about me learning from that. It's not me saying, "Oh, why are you offended?" Right? It's me learning
Right.
of
Yeah.
why I offended you. Right? So within that group, I learned a lot. I had that was my first time being around trans men in a space like that.
Hmm.
Um, and it was a learning process. It was a learning process just from start to finish. And building a bond and a brotherhood with everyone was just kind of like the amazing thing. The fact that that I could do that,
Yeah.
and the fact that we could do that, and the fact that I grew friendships from it. Being a
Absolutely.
cis heterosexual man
Hmm.
who and this goes to something I had a conversation about recently at work. Because when you're a black male in a space full of white folks, they want you to do race work, and usually ends up terribly. A white person was saying that they didn't think about black folks until they worked around black folks, and specifically kids where we work.
Hmm.
And the person who's was facilitating was a white guy, straight cisgendered white guy from
Hmm.
Jefferson County, the whole
Hmm.
ordeal. But he was saying that was offensive, and I was like, no, that was real and honest. I appreciate
Yeah.
me for I appreciate raw, real honesty, and she
Yeah.
was real and honest in that moment. I mean, she hadn't thought about black folks. It was like she said, these are quote, "Would you stay over there? We stay over here." I never felt
Hmm.
that amongst trans folks. I just never had experienced it. Right? I never was in a space where I
Yeah.
was like, oh, I'll have some trans friends.
Yeah.
But that experience in general, like, really reshaped my thinking when it came to a lot of things, including sexuality, including all of those things. And at the time, my wife was working for an organization called Safe Connections, which I think
Mm.
sponsored the event. And she was working
Mm.
around people who thought about these things constantly, daily. They worked on
Hmm.
them. And she would always come home and have all these nuanced sort of thoughts about these things. And I would tell her, like, that's not the real world, right? That's the real world
Hmm.
where you work, but don't like get it twisted. It's just reality for everybody. Like, we are not that far along yet. So that
Hmm.
experience was an amazing experience for me. Just in general, just being in the space with you all and just seeing some of the things that came up that hurt you all,
Hmm.
which I would never have thought about before, honestly.
Hmm.
But I've thought about ever since then, honestly, including the next year when I did it again with another group of mixed gender men.
Hmm. That's awesome. And I appreciate you sharing that,
Mm-hmm.
and also talking about like just being honest and real with each other, and how
Mm-hmm.
that's so much more effective than like worrying about offending each other, right?
Right, right, right. Yeah. And me and this person at work, we've had over drinks in my house, gotten to screaming matches with each other. He's
Hmm.
obviously different than I am, but we've always remained friends throughout it, right? Like,
Hmm.
it's like, I'm pretty passionate about certain things, and you all were pretty passionate about things. But I think
Hmm.
sometimes, and I guess we can use language. Sometimes you got to shut the fuck up and listen to people, um,
Yeah.
who you haven't been around,
Hmm.
and listen to their pains, their joys, their so on and so on. So that's what I was able to do in that space. If I did nothing else, I did that in that space. So I shut the fuck
Hmm.
up. I listened and I learned.
Yeah. And I did a lot of learning as well. I think until that point, I felt like the way you described feeling about trans people, I felt about black people, that like I just hadn't been around and like directly talked to
Mm-hmm.
a lot. And that was definitely like a key experience in my anti-racism journey.
Mm-hmm.
So I appreciate you
Yeah.
sharing that with me and being a part of my journey.
Yeah.
Um, so tell me about the work that you do now.
So I do a lot of work, but specifically the Village Path um, the path stands for uh, God, I'm drawing a blank. So programs to access therapy and healing.
Yeah.
literally a village of programs to help self-identified Black men. The first thing that we did was the Healing and Writing Circle,
Hmm.
which started in August of 2019, and probably was probably off the spirit of the work that we did there.
Hmm.
Honestly, just needing sort of a space. I'm not from the Midwest, but from the East Coast.
Hmm.
Um, Things are a lot different on the East Coast when it comes to like being around different people ethnically.
Hmm.
Um, and just being around Black folks, was a little more there. When I moved here, I would go to all these different events, and I would never see Black men. Honestly, whether it was an event for the mayor, whether it was parties, whether it was anything. So I decided to create what I didn't see, and to also have men come together and discuss, their shit. Um, so that started in 2019. After that, COVID hit shortly after. We went viral. We went virtual.
Hmm.
Then after that, the uprisings happened around the country. Around that same
Hmm.
time, we raised money for self-identified Black men to get free therapy. We
Hmm.
were able to do that. We started off with the goal of just raising $1,000. We ended up
Hmm.
raising $16,000, which we are still using to this day. Um,
That's awesome.
yeah, so we still actually are putting Black men through therapy for free, 5 sessions. How long ago was that? Maybe a year or two now.
Hmm.
So we're still using those funds. People still hit us up on the regular for that. We also have a podcast. We also work with young men once a week. We'll be working with the unhoused, a group of young men in the next couple of weeks here in the St. Louis region. Um, and yeah, that encompasses all what we do. By day, I work at an all boys Catholic school,
Hmm.
which um, which has its challenges, right?
Hmm.
um,
Yeah.
as you can think of what that sounds like. But I realize a lot of those times in discussions with those young men, if it's not going to be me having these conversations about things, there's going to be no one. Like for example, I had a conversation with the young man, a couple of young guys this week, uh, about having gay friends. Um,
Yeah.
and these are, these guys look up to me. Some of these guys are a little rough around the edges. They're inner city, mostly Black
Hmm.
young men in the all boys school,
Hmm.
an all boys Catholic school. And I posed the question to them like, if one of your friends told you they were gay, would you not be friends with them anymore? Be this person forever?
Hmm.
And of course, it didn't go over well. but
Yeah.
but I think I planted some seeds there. Like if I could be friends, when you view me every day, you know who I am. If I could be friends with people who don't share the same sexuality than I do, why can't you all? And I have friends from
Hmm.
all different kinds of backgrounds. Not to sound like a white racist person, but I do have like I have white friends, I have gay friends, I have trans friends, I have Middle Eastern friends. I think that's what kind of makes America great, so to speak.
Hmm.
Is that it is a melting pot if you take advantage of it. If you just stay in your little
Hmm.
silo and don't befriend people, then how will you learn?
Exactly.
So yeah, I say all
Absolutely.
that to say, those are the main two things I do.
Absolutely. So I am super excited to kind of dig in about like
Hmm.
um, unlearning toxic masculinity and like what that journey has looked like for you
Yeah. Hmm.
as like a cis person,
Right.
or just like your journey, whatever, however you want to take that.
Hmm. Yeah. So that's a great question. Um, so what I will say is there's no like golden gate at the end of unlearning the things you learned for your whole life, right? Like,
Right.
you don't stand on the top of learning toxic masculinity. Like, I was raised in a toxic society. I'm going to die in one, more than likely. Um,
Hmm.
so um, there is no end. Like, you never stop working towards that. Basically, you're always on
Hmm.
that path, right? There's still toxic things about me today that I would like to get rid of. That are hard.
Yeah.
Um, and they show up in certain ways sometimes, right? And even
Hmm.
though I have all of these friends and all these experiences, which may probably make me different than most cisgendered men, I
Hmm.
still have my shit with me, right?
Hmm.
To not admit that would be problematic, right?
Hmm.
I don't have it all figured out. I don't. Um, I think that's where people go wrong. They think, oh, if I throw on this shirt, or I, put this in my bio, then I
Mm-hmm.
am going against all of these things and I have it all figured out. No, you don't.
Mm-hmm.
You're probably one of the ones we need to worry about.
Mm-hmm.
um, so yeah, I would say there is no right path. I would say it's all learning experiences. Surround
Mm-hmm.
yourself with people who aren't like you. Learn from people.
Mm-hmm.
Learn their experiences. Listen to people.
Mm-hmm.
Sit with people. And then people a shoulder to cry on. I just got a call today or a text today from someone who just recently had their surgery who was transitioning from male to female.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that they trust me enough to text me and my wife that, and talk about their transition and the things that they're going through and ask for assistance when they need it is good. It's all I need, to feel
That's
like I
wonderful.
am on the right track
Mm-hmm.
to being a good quote unquote ally. But there is no perfect ally, right?
Right.
Um, that goes for white folks too, right? You still have your
Yeah,
shit with you. Do I
of
check
course.
every time that I hear someone say something toxic? No, because I'll be checking people all fucking day.
Right.
It's not realistic, right?
Mm-hmm.
Should I? Absolutely. But do I? No. There's things that get said around when I'm around that I don't check every last time.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I try,
Yeah.
I attempt to. So I would say there is no golden gate on the end of this journey when it comes to all of these things. We're
Mm-hmm.
all still learning. We're all still imperfect human beings, imperfect specimens. Um, what I would like to see a lot more as we grow into like this whole social media dynamic and people just go into their corners is like a little grace for each other, which is hard because that's where we are right now as a society. There is no grace,
Mm-hmm.
right? There is no room to
Mm-hmm.
fuck up.
Mm-hmm. Amen. Yes. I would very much like to see more of that as well.
Just a little bit. I'm
Uh,
not saying that we can't
like,
like cancel some people, but I'm just
yeah,
saying just a
like,
tad more.
right. And yes, I agree wholeheartedly. And I think, having conversations with people that are different from us and like admitting that we're not perfect, like, you just did, is a big part of that, right?
Mm-hmm. All right. It's like
Um,
it's like a person at my job who's super conservative, um, and I'm not super conservative at all. And I'm sure they hold like some really, really toxic views. This person actually has a trans son who goes to the school, believe it or not, who, when
mhm.
I heard is transitioning. Um, but I'm always down to even have a conversation with them about things. I think when you know people, you know them. Like last semester, I had a kid who was a Trump supporter,
Mhm.
who was on the spectrum, and this kid would
Mhm.
turn any assignment that he turned in to into an article about the Trump and the woke mob. Sweetest kid you
Mhm.
ever want to meet in your life, like super sweet
Yeah.
kid.
Mhm.
But hopefully, him sitting with me and being like, Mr. Perry isn't out to get me or or harm
Mhm.
me in any way. Maybe some of these politics aren't super bad or crazy, but when you have like Fox News on and you're 16, 17, and and your parents are who they are, and you're surrounded by these things, and you're inundated, and you're in your silo, you tend to think people are scarier than what they are. And that goes for politics, that goes for gender, that goes for race, that goes for everything. We need to talk to each other a little more than we do.
Yeah. Absolutely. Um, One of the things in my work, just as a massage therapist, I'm, open and out, and I don't bring it up unless it comes up, but it is on my bio on the website, and I've had a couple of clients that otherwise would not knowingly have met a trans person,
Mm-hmm.
like tell me stories about how knowing me has changed their view on things.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so yeah, just like
All right.
being being the wonderful human you are, um, plant some good seeds.
Right, which isn't your responsibility. Your responsibility isn't to change those people, but I think
Right.
naturally having dialogues with people is actually a good thing
Hmm.
at the end of the day. But that also isn't your responsibility, too,
Right.
You're trying to just exist as a human being.
Right. Um, and in an ideal world, we could um, just all be. At least on my end of things, like I feel like I have the resources to be able to hold that space.
Right. Some people don't.
Yeah.
I'm not mad at them,
Um,
right?
yeah. And um, anyway, I've always thought of you as somebody that was like very grounded and like um, just even and like you hold a lot of space for other people to
Hmm.
be vulnerable and heal. Can you tell me
Right.
about some of the ways that you take care of yourself so that you're able to do that effectively?
Wow, that's a good question. I'm still figuring that piece out, honestly, in life, right?
Yeah.
Um, it feels like, doing this work, you have to really make time and space for yourself. And that's something I'm
Hmm.
really just understanding, like, in the last year.
Hmm.
Because I take calls constantly, emails constantly.
Yeah.
I have a wife, I have a niece, I have a nephew who lives with me, I have a dog, I have a cat, I have family back home and their
Hmm.
traumas. So sometimes it can be hard to make space for yourself. Um, and honestly, I don't really have a set routine that I have. But it's like,
Yeah.
even though I know all of these things and I preach all of these things, and you know, but for me recently, as a work in progress, and I'm talking maybe in the last 2, 3 months, has been trying to make sure I have a set bedtime of getting like 7 hours of sleep in at the very least.
Mm-hmm.
Um, walks are like super helpful for me. Walks, communicating with like my grandmother, my mom,
Hmm.
dinners with my wife. Um, those things are all things I try to do. Movies with my wife when we have time because she runs a separate business and she's super busy and she teaches at WashU. So um, all of those things, just trying to be present is like one of the things for me. Um,
Hmm.
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't really have the full on, answer to that. And what I tell people all the time is sometimes people, when you do this work, they look at you like you're a guru of some sorts, and I am not. I am not a guru. I
Hmm.
don't have all the answers. I don't want all the answers. I don't strive to have all the answers. I'm not a perfect
Hmm.
human being at all. Um,
Hmm.
so yeah, even stuff like that is things that I realize I need to work on, and it's like a work in progress for me. It's just kind of making sure that I take care of myself in order so I can take care of others.
Hmm. Yeah. As a massage therapist, I don't have that figured out either. I, I suggest all these things and like I know a
Right.
lot of stuff about how to like make people's bodies feel good, and you know, don't look at my yoga practice. Don't ask about it. um,
Right.
so, um, what I want to, I guess, step back a little bit and return to like talking about masculinity and all of that.
Hmm.
Was there anything in particular that like started your journey on like rethinking how you relate to other men and masculinity?
Wow. You asked some really great questions. Um, I actually don't think I've never thought about that before, honestly. I don't think there was one
That's okay.
shining. There wasn't one shining moment. I think it was like a
Mhm.
bunch of different like snapshots, right?
Okay.
So,
Yeah.
um, and like if I was with my therapist, he probably would take it to childhood or something, right? Something that probably happened to me.
Hmm.
And where I always start off when it comes to this is probably like falling off the bike when I was like 8. I grew up single parent home. Mother
Hmm.
like try to do everything that a mother does in a single parent home, play basketball, take you for rides on your bike, stuff like that. And I remember falling down off of my Night Rider bike. I'm gonna age myself, so I had like this bike. And if you know anything about Night Rider, if you're old like me, like it had like this whole like black dashboard,
Hmm.
It was like the car that Michael Knight rode. And
Hmm.
I fell off the bike, and I remember seeing the blood, and you cry.
Hmm.
And then your mother tells you the boys don't cry. How would she know in
Hmm.
hindsight, looking back on all these years, because she's not a boy. And, but
Hmm.
when I hear that, that's kind of I think the first thing that probably clicked. Then it probably was like relationships with
Hmm.
my male friends over the years through high school. Some of those being toxic in various ways, like most high school relationships are with male friends.
Hmm.
And just reaching a space recently where I was like, just making sure. all of those guys who I still speak to tell them I love them still,
Hmm.
no matter what. So all of those things kind of, from childhood to adulthood, um, and just seeing like the mental health aspect of all of these things and vulnerability and, the
Hmm.
ages that men die in, how we die younger than, women,
Hmm.
and how we die from heart disease, how we don't go to the doctor, mental health, all of those things, and how all of those things kind of culminate. Probably has something to do with it. Learning those things and going through like getting a master's in social work and correlating all those things to black men and the
Hmm.
disparities was kind of one of those things that probably sort of formed and focused.
Hmm.
Yeah.
I I listened to one of the podcast episodes,
Mhm.
the one that was focused on you,
Mhm. Oh
before
yeah. Mhm.
this, and I just lost my train of thought. Oh, I just I remember like you talking about um, like not feeling comfortable to like share your vulnerability,
Mhm. Yeah.
um, and I guess like how did you start that process for yourself of like opening up and building those relationships?
Um. That's a good question. Uh, I think a big start probably was the Men Story Project. Just getting
Hmm.
older and realizing that not being emotional isn't really a cool thing, right?
Hmm.
Reaches a certain point when you get to a certain point of adulthood where you're like, you know what? I don't cry very often at all. I can count the times that I've cried since I was 13,
Hmm.
which is probably maybe 3 times from
Hmm.
13 to 40, which is a long time period, right?
Hmm.
Just realizing how unnormal that is.
Hmm.
At one point in my life, I'm sure I had that as a badge of honor. But as I got
Yeah.
older, I was like, you know what? Like people have died. Like, fucked up shit
Yeah.
has happened to me. Like this isn't really normal.
Right. Yeah.
um, and my nephew, who's 10, who lives with my wife and I, who cries a lot and who I
Hmm.
allow it, I make sure that I let him cry. But one day he asked me, he was like, I've never seen you cry. And I was like, damn, that's kind of, kids are like super insightful.
Hmm.
But yeah, I mean, yeah, all of those kind of things led me to realize how normal it is and how, like, probably goes back to childhood once again and being on a night rider bike. And
Yeah.
just like, and sort of having to have this fake gruff exterior, which kind of gets old and played out by the time you reach like, real adulthood, and you get those years up
Hmm.
on you.
Yeah. So just as you got older, you just like I don't need to keep doing this. Like I don't need to
Right.
keep carrying all of this. Yeah.
Right. So I'm gonna walk through my house because I need to charge my phone. But yeah.
No worries. And like let me know if at any point we have to cut this short.
Oh no, yeah, I'm
Um,
gonna try to make sure I won't charge my phone. But yeah.
awesome. So I guess the next question that I have written down that I want to ask
Hmm.
is there anything in particular that you feel like you've gained since you've started that journey of like being more open? Is there anything that you would like to share with people that you've gained?
Um. Okay, that's another. You ask great questions. Um. Anything that I've gained at the start of that journey. Um. I would say I've listened to others. I've seen other men cry. I've seen other
Hmm.
men grow vulnerable.
Hmm.
Um. Um. I've gained that I'm not the only person who feels this way or is like this.
Yeah.
And I think I've just gained accessibility to other men who are
Hmm.
also on this journey.
Hmm.
So, with strength in numbers, um,
Absolutely.
when you're not the only one going through something, you're like, oh, okay, it's fine if I have emotions. There we go. Um, it's fine if I um, show my emotions in a different way.
Hmm.
Stoicism is a real thing. And it's something I've tried to work through therapy. Um,
Hmm.
I've gone to therapy. Um,
Yeah.
Something I would have never thought about doing 5 years ago because I
Hmm.
thought I was, pretty normal and pretty sane.
Hmm.
Um, but then I realized that most people who feel like they're normal and sane probably are the crazy ones. So
Hmm.
yeah.
Hmm. Can you elaborate more on the stoicism that you just mentioned?
hmm Yeah. So it's the elder who comes to our group, and that's the word that he used. I think I was talking about these things one day, maybe initially. So stoicism is exactly that. It's to have the stoic face.
Hmm.
Most, people who are born male are, at one point, I think stoicism in the 1950s was like a real thing when it came to men, if I'm not
Hmm.
mistaken. So it's just that, it's, the ability to not show emotions.
Hmm.
I remember I'm a huge rap fan. Lil Wayne had a line in the song where he said, "No emotions from a king," and
Mm.
I think most people are taught. That line made sense to me even then, before I was even thinking about any of these things. Is that most people look at rulers as not ruling from emotions. When if
Hmm.
you think of it, most men are super fucking emotional, and a lot of people have died by rulers who are super emotional, right?
Hmm. Yeah.
But yeah, that's just stoicism in a nutshell.
Gotcha. Um, awesome. And then, so there is a conversation that I'm kind of in the middle of on
hmm
TikTok right now
hmm
among trans men
hmm
who have been talking about how our definition of masculinity
hmm
is often just not femininity.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah.
So, like, men don't cry because
hmm
crying is a feminine trait. So,
hmm
the conversation being like, how do we define masculinity in a way that isn't just not femininity? And I would be curious of your thoughts on that.
Wow. That's yeah, super tough. Um.
And I don't have the answer either. Like, I have examples, like, um, Mr. Rogers
mhm.
or like LeVar Burton of Reading Rainbow,
I
are
love
like,
Mr. Rogers.
of like
Fred
images of
Rogers is
like,
just yeah. I love Fred Rogers. Like just yeah, the documentary just yeah. I would say why do we need to define it? Why does it have to have a
okay,
definition?
sure, yeah,
I mean, I think and if like again, if you asked me this question a few years ago, I would have like boom, 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 like
sure.
and that's one of the things I ask young men when I work with them. That's one of the first things we do is like this thing on the definition of manhood and masculinity, and I have them write it down on a piece of paper. And usually it's
Hmm.
like pay bills, and usually it's like all these things. But I'm not sure if you've heard of the man box, which is like I can't remember
I feel
the
like I
guy's
have,
name.
but refresh my memory.
Yeah, so what's the person? I can't remember his name, but you could Google, you could YouTube it. It's a YouTube, but he goes over the man box where all of these things are,
Oh.
what defines men. Um, and if you look at a lot of those things, a lot of those things will lead you to like heart attacks,
Hmm.
stress, anxiety. So it's like things like paying bills, being a provider,
Hmm.
um, all those things that we typically think of fathers from like the 50s, 60s, 70s on down. But if you think
Hmm.
about those things, all that shit is stressful. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, yeah.
it's super. Not even just not even get to the toxic portion of it, but it's stressful, right?
Hmm.
Like it's hard. It's almost impossible to live up to those standards
Hmm.
of those things, right? Um, so to answer your question, I would say, why do we? I think, and as we, as my generation sort of gets older, and the generations before me, after me, like I see kids with nail polish now who are probably straight,
Yeah.
um, or be self-identified as straight cisgender males.
Hmm.
So I think these things are getting more fluid. I
Hmm.
think within certain populations, I think there'll always be toxic masculinity as long as I live anyway. There are people who
Hmm.
hold on to those things and ideas, but I think amongst a certain sort of crowd, I think those things will be more fluid and won't be as
Hmm.
commonplace. Um, so I would say I don't know why we need to define these things. I don't. I think we're moving away from
Sure.
those definitions as the new generation sort of comes about.
Hmm. I like that of just like, just let people be, right?
So let people be. Let people be who they want to be. I think that's kind of the way we going. Like I have these conversations
Hmm.
with my dad all the time, who is a 65-year-old black man from Philadelphia,
Mhm.
who is all of those things. He was 6 sons by, multiple women and the whole thing. Um, and we always have conversations. I talk to him about these things all the time when it comes to like religion, when it comes to like manhood, masculinity, when it comes to like, he's somebody who's worked around gaming his whole life. He's worked in a hotel for a long time. Um,
Mhm.
and last time I talked to him, he was here for about a month. And we got into conversations about it. And then he started running down a long list of all these gay men who, like, came at him on a sexual level over his life. Um, I was just trying to pull those things out of him and talk those things, work through those things. And I was saying, I've never been around a gay man in my life who never made me feel uncomfortable ever.
Mhm.
Like, I don't know, maybe I'm not as attractive as he is. I have no idea. But,
Mhm.
like, so even like having those conversations with your parents and my dad, I enjoy
Mhm.
talking to my dad, even though he can be toxic. He's, he's an older black man from a
Mhm.
different generation. But yeah, I don't know why we need to define any of those things. I think we're moving away from defining those things, hopefully.
I like that. Um, let's see here. Is there anything that you would recommend or would like to say to the partners of men who are beginning their unlearning journey?
Um, I would say to listen. That's the one thing we do at the Healing and Writing Circle,
Hmm.
is active listening.
Hmm.
Um, so to listen without thinking of what you're going to say next to somebody is important,
Hmm.
which we don't do as human beings. I know I don't do it. If I listen to someone, I'm thinking, oh, how can I solve a solution for this person? How can I help this person? Oh, I have this memory that happened to me that's similar to that. I already have a reply for you. I think like,
Hmm.
actively listening to someone in general as a baseline rule.
Hmm.
Um, I think that's always a start is listening. Um, Not providing people advice always. Um,
Hmm.
a professor told me years ago that providing advice for people is one of the worst things you could do.
Hmm.
Um, and at the time, I didn't really, you know, I thought about it for a long time, like all these years later. And if you think about it, it really kind of is. Like, people don't want
Hmm.
advice from you most of the time. Like,
Hmm.
people want you to draw the answers that they already have in them out, for the most
Hmm.
part.
Hmm.
So when the people come to you with their problems, whatever it is, beyond just, the learning journey thing, is just, sort of actively listen and sort of help
Hmm.
people pull what they need to pull out of those
Hmm.
things. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, do you have any particular like skills that you can share about active listening?
Reflective questioning. So if someone says something, you say the question back to them. Like I
Hmm.
said, most people know what they want to do and what they need to do.
Hmm.
Um, so really, what they're coming to you for is someone to sort of listen to. I talked to my brother for about 4 hours last week um, on a phone call, and he's going through a separation right now.
Hmm.
And and it was one of those conversations like that's like circular. It was like a lot of circular conversations. We're going around in circles for 4 hours. Um, until finally my other brother who was on the call also was just like, you need to go to, some couples counseling.
Hmm.
And, I thought about it afterwards and I was like, no, he probably needs some individual counseling because I can finish a lot of these stories better than he can because he harps on them all the time. Um,
Hmm.
so now that's what most of your good therapists do. They don't really provide you with a straight line. That's what you need to do. They kind of,
Hmm.
reflect back on the things that you said to them, to you. That's what most good
Hmm.
therapists do. They don't say, "Oh, Andy, you need to take two lefts and then a right," and then they more so tell you that you provide the journey for them, for
Hmm.
yourself. So I would say reflective questions is always a good thing.
Hmm. Absolutely. Um, you've talked about um, like having conflicts with some of your friends
Hmm.
and being able to still be friends with some of those people.
Oh yeah. Yep.
Um, can you talk about the process of repair
Mm.
after you have those conflicts, and if there's anything you can like recommend.
Um,
Um,
yeah, this is like, yeah, so most of my friends I get into it on a daily basis with. We have like a group text. One of my friends is, you know, he's sort of like, very antagonistic. Um,
mhm,
so, we've known each other for a really long time. So a lot of things we get into, we really don't take personally. Um,
mhm,
Now, if it's someone new, like, my friend I was talking about earlier, who's from Jefferson County, and he and I get into it about race and education all the time and things like that.
mhm,
There's not really a lot of that with a lot of people I know. Like people who I
mhm.
really like, know who I get into it with. Um, so I'm probably a bad person to ask that question to because I really don't do a whole lot when it comes to that because I really don't get into it with people. I think most people I get
Fair.
into it with usually it's like a fair exchange, no
Mm,
robbery. Like not
mhm,
everybody's different. Um, so it's even like where I work, I work with a bunch of high school aged boys.
mhm.
And even when I get into it with them, sometimes I think, oh, I have to have this whole sort of restorative thing to like apologize. Now maybe I should have approached it a different way. You can't coach
Hmm.
every player the same. Some people you got to hug, you got to give tough love to. A lot of times they forgot about that shit the next day.
Yeah.
They're not harping on that, they really don't want you to. Um,
Hmm.
so yeah, I'm probably a bad person to ask that question to.
Yeah. Well, let me ask this. You had, just mentioned the people that you do get into it with,
Hmm.
that it's like it's fair,
Hmm.
and um, you're both being honest and
Hmm.
everything, but it's not like
Hmm.
there's no need for repair afterwards. Can you talk
Right.
about like how that looks
Hmm.
so that it is, a fair exchange?
Yeah, that's another good question. I think I seek those people out though. Honestly,
Yeah.
that's probably a toxic trait of mine, probably too. Right? Like a lot of people in my life. I don't really have those conversations with everyone. Like mostly, I'm
Hmm.
amicable with people, and generally not a combative person.
Hmm.
Um, so I think maybe just in talking to you and thinking about this out, maybe I do seek those people out who I can have those conversations with and who can
Yeah.
sort of quote unquote handle it,
Hmm.
in ways. Um, and maybe that's a personality trait for me.
Hmm. And I don't. I mean, it sounds to me like you are engaging in conversations where
Hmm.
everyone's consenting to how the conversation's being
And
had.
maybe that's it too, yeah. And maybe a lot of
Yeah.
times not, but yeah. It's like something you have to learn about a person too, like because I can,
Hmm.
I'm also one of those people. If I can dish it out, but I can take it too, right?
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
so like, I remember, um, and alcohol was involved. I remember I got into it in my kitchen with the coworker I was talking about. And he and I got into a really bad shouting match just about work stuff, which we
Hmm.
probably shouldn't be talking about work while we drink on a Friday night. But yeah, it's one of those things. We work with kids, so you don't really leave that when you have a passion for it. And he's super passionate about education, as am I. We just have different views about things and about discipline and about a lot of those things. And what that looks like when you teach kids of color. Um,
Hmm.
and it wasn't like we didn't have to have any sort of conversation about that going forward. It was just like, shake hands and, that's your opinion, that's my opinion, and we move on.
Hmm. I hear you.
Mhm.
It sounds like, I mean, ultimately, like you still fundamentally respect each other as
Yeah,
people.
yeah, yeah. And I kind of respect it about people who I can have those conversations with about certain
Hmm.
topics. Now, I'm not, most people would tell you I'm pretty docile when it comes to most things and probably non-committal. um,
Hmm.
to the point where it's hard for me to decide where I want to eat every day if my wife and I decide to go get food. Um, but like a few topics actually probably get me pumping, like race, education, things that are in my wheelhouse, masculinity. Um, but other than
Hmm.
that, maybe it's a few probably topics that probably get me there. Everything else I'm sort
Hmm.
of like up in the air about.
Gotcha. We had one person ask, Liz, who's works with me with Triangle Wellness.
Mm-hmm.
Do you notice a change in behavior after the conversation that you had, that you got into that?
Not at all. Like, yeah, we still
Not at all.
we're still really good friends.
Hmm.
To this day. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It wasn't any change in behavior on either of our parts. at first I was like, oh, I just got into it with a coworker in my kitchen, while we were probably a little hammered on a Friday night. but but no, it was fine, and I kind of respected about him because it's like,
Hmm.
if you're gonna have if we're gonna talk race and we're gonna talk about all these things that are sort of like super not divisive, not that's not what I'm looking for, but super hot topics that get people boiling, and then those things kind of do come up
Hmm.
for me. I'm super passionate about it. I now there's people now on the flip side of that, thinking about it. I listen to people at work when we've had these conversations where I haven't had like a rectifying moment because like I'm going to stand on this. All right, sorry I offended you. Like this is why you kind of don't invite me to your conversations about race at work because things are going to come up. I'm going to be passionate. I'm going to say things, and you might not like those things, which is why I don't like to be a part of those conversations. But when
Hmm.
you are one of the only few black folks in the workspace, um, yeah, sometimes people are going to be a little passionate about those things. So yeah, I think on the flip
Understandable.
side, I think I have had those passionate conversations with people who I'm not friends with or who
Hmm.
I don't know their intentions, they don't know my intentions. So it makes it a
Hmm.
little more difficult. So I guess the answer is intentions. Like I
Hmm.
knew his intentions, he knew my intentions.
Yeah,
So that was the fair exchange, I think. Um, so I think on the opposite end of that, when you don't know someone's intentions, then it kind of gets a little murky.
for sure.
Thank you for that question.
Yeah, thank you for that answer.
Yeah.
Um, I feel like that clarifies some things for me that I've been chewing on.
Yeah, and I had to talk my way out. I had to talk my way through that answer. So thank you, Liz.
No, completely understandable. So we have, kind of about 10 minutes left of the
hmm
time that we had talked about.
hmm
Is there any other topic or anything that you like want to share with the people?
I will say, we at the Village Path are looking for board members. So if
Okay.
anyone is listening right now who has skills to be a board member, or would be interested, they can reach out to us at info at the Village Path. We will
Hmm.
be having some events come up soon. We're having another virtual event on February 22nd, for all Black humans. So if you're cisgendered, if you're LGBTQ plus, if you're a trans person, whatever the case is, then you're more than welcome to join us. I think what separates us as organization is that we're able to bring Black straight men together with LGBTQ plus men and sort of have it as a safe environment where we protect them as our brothers also and make sure that they feel safe in that space. What
Yeah.
other people have told me not, but I'm just saying on this Instagram live. So I think that
Yeah.
kind of you really don't see that very often. If we've done
Yeah.
nothing else, I think we've done a good job of that and probably have been different of not making it a toxic space where men just get
Hmm.
together and just rant, about their own
Hmm.
male problems. So yeah.
That's
Also,
wonderful.
yeah. So you could also check us out at the Village Path on
Hmm.
Instagram.
Hmm.
Like us, we have actually someone who's interning who will be doing social media for us every day for the month. Um, we'll also have a women's reading in March. My wife just got published. She's a writer, so she'll be doing a reading on our website.
Hmm.
And yeah, just follow us, support us. Yeah.
That's awesome. What's the name of your podcast?
It's the Black Mental Village podcast.
Hmm.
So actually, we recorded this podcast a while ago, but we had some bumps along the road. So actually, we'll be
Hmm.
releasing a new podcast with our first trans person, black
That's
trans
exciting.
woman. Um, and yeah, check that out. That'll be coming out, I think, next week. Finally.
That's awesome. Please send that to me when that
hmm
is officially announced, and I'll
I got
put
you.
it
Yeah.
on.
So yeah,
Awesome.
and the podcast actually starts with a story. That's how we start all our podcasts off with. So they
Hmm.
tell a story. I think it's more of a poem that they tell, and then we delve
Hmm.
into a few questions after that.
That's awesome. So one question that we've been asking every guest at the end is, what is your favorite book? So do you
Hmm.
want to talk about that?
Yeah. So, and this is kind of a generic answer, like, but
That's okay.
my favorite book is the autobiography of Malcolm X. The reason why is if you look at the life of Malcolm X, his life was all about transitions. From
Mm,
how he was born in 1925, Oklahoma, to his father being killed at a young age, to him being a pimp, a drug addict, to him going to prison, to even take that back a few steps, to him being told he couldn't be a lawyer because he was the N word, which his teacher said to
mm,
him, which led him down a path of crime, which led him to prison, which led him to eventually join the Nation of Islam, which led him to eventually, um, being killed and murdered. And, it just tells a story about you, how you start isn't always how you finish, even through the life of that
mm,
one person, and all the
mm,
transitions he went through in life. So that was kind of a book that I read. I'm not even sure when I read it. I think I was a young adult.
mm,
Um, but it just let me know that, you have plenty of transitions in your life. Your life just won't be sort of like one straight run thing. It'll be a lot of different um, turns and twists in your life, and how you start and always how you finish. So I feel like it's a great book for that.
absolutely. I am trying to read more, so I definitely will check that out.
Yeah, it's a
That
good
was a
read.
good. It sounds like it.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for joining me here.
Thank
I
you,
just
Andy.
have
Thank you
so
for having me.
I have so much love for you
Hmm.
and for everything that you're doing. And
Appreciate it.
yeah, I hope we can meet up in person again, hopefully
Absolutely. I'm
sometime in the
always I'm
future.
always down for a random call, message, text. So I always call.
Okay,
I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, I haven't spoken to this person in a couple years, but yeah, let's do it.
awesome. Well, thank you so much, and I hope you have a great night.
Thank you. You too.
All right,
All
bye.
right. Bye bye.